The next panel discussion is going to be called Addressing Fear and Building Trust, Exploring the Concerns and Misconceptions of Generative AI. And for this, I would like to welcome on stage our moderator, Dr. Larry Heck, who is Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering in Georgia Tech, as well as all the panelists that will be participating in this discussion today. Thank you very much.
Morning. It's my pleasure to be a moderator for this esteemed panel. We're going to start out with some brief introductions. Michael, do you want to start with the introduction?
Yeah, Mike Sanders, Vice President of Creative Technology for Activision Blizzard.
I'm Patrice Latin. I'm a partner at EY in charge of data and artificial intelligence in Brussels, but also for Europe.
I'm Jeanette Gotzala. I'm the Vice President of the European AI Forum, the umbrella association of the European AI industry.
Hi, my name is Bernard. I am president of a K-12 school in Switzerland. So that's kindergarten all the way up to graduation. We have a very forward-looking focus, and so we've been engaging with AI over the last few months and even years. And I'm passionate about this panel because I believe education is probably the key to address many of the issues we're going to be discussing today.
Absolutely. And I'm Larry Heck, and I'm actually in education now. I've been a professor for 2 years. The prior 30 years, I was in Silicon Valley. I was a research scientist with Microsoft Research, Google Research, and then I was also an executive at Samsung most recently. So as you can tell, we have a wide variety of backgrounds here, so I think this is going to be a really interesting panel. Let me start out with one of the questions that we often get asked, and as we talked about it ahead of time, we thought this would be a good starter. What is different about the current state of AI, in this case generative AI, that has brought the issue of trust and fear to the forefront as compared to previous years? Michael, do you want to start out with that?
Sure. Yeah, there's two concepts that come to mind for me. One is that with this year we've had open public access to tools like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, that have given a visual identity to AI in a way that sort of rapidly tells the story of AI to an average non-technical person. And what happens next is they start to question, well, where does this data come from? And so that starts to set fears in motion of data protection, copyright, et cetera. The other component of fear, I think, that comes from that same sort of mechanism was the open beta access of these things allowed for rapid data collection, as well as the reinforcement learning of these tools, which then causes an exponential growth in the versioning of these tools. People extrapolate the growth curve, and it scares them if it was sustainable at that rate. And the reality is it's not. It was mentioned earlier that these things might plateau. They absolutely will. Once you have enough discrete data to train a model, it's pretty much plateaued.
Maybe to complement, as we have seen already this morning, it's very powerful. Generative AI capabilities, these tools, powerful and demonstrated by ChatGPT popularity, it's very user-friendly. So people don't really see where the limits are anymore. They think, is it like a human who's talking behind? Is it something that is so close to human intelligence? So that these big discussions, debate about the impact on humans, and that's a very important aspect. Then there's a clear misunderstanding on these limitations, but also how it works and how it is based on. And so these problems we need to address to building back confidence, to create value, because we see that there's so many applications, positive applications. And additionally, we see also negative applications, things that people with malicious intent would probably divert the usage of generative AI to do things that we don't want to do.
Yeah, so trust becomes a big
Trust
issue.
becomes
yeah.
even more
Yeah,
important
yeah.
than ever in these capabilities.
Right.
I would like to build on what you said and address 3 points to what has changed, right? Because AI is not something new. It's been around, I mean, you surely know, we all know, for quite some time. But what has changed since last summer? These tools are in the market and easily accessible for everyone, right? There is no cost or just very, very small cost, so everyone can use them, and they're user-friendly. So AI is not a geek or nerd topic anymore. AI is in the broad media and in the broad masses. And this has actually caused this fire of generative AI and excitement about all the possibilities. But where is this fear coming from? Of course, we see these tools are very powerful and getting more powerful every day. So of course, there is anxiety, job anxiety, for example. I mean, I'm a firm believer in augmentation, but we can discuss that later. I think where we need to be careful is, you mentioned it already, with the limits of these tools, because we only see the possibilities, right? But there are limits and there are dangers. And also, how we use them responsibly and how we develop our economy and society, in particular in terms of education, for the future.
Yeah. Okay, so on the second question, what are some of the most common misconceptions about generative AI, particularly regarding its relationship to artificial general intelligence, or AGI, and how can these misconceptions be clarified? Anybody? Free for all.
Patrice, I think this would be a good one for you.
Thank you. Yeah, there's actually a conflation with artificial general intelligence. So these limits, again, we were referring to, that they understand the language. It's capable to do some paintings and to do so fantastic things. So how can we actually make, is this machine, these intelligent machines, so intelligent? So we can talk about the definition of intelligence, but there's these limits, this usage. Typically, we know what is the usage of a technology. Many people are talking about the example of a hammer. You know what is the hammer, you know that it's what it's used for, but you also can use this hammer for bad things, for knocking. I want to knock you with the hammer. That's not the usage. So that's another misconception. Say, okay, now I don't know exactly what I can do with this tool. It's opening to many questions, and I don't know which question, which response I will get. Is it true? Is it correct or not? So we will have a big aspect to manage misconceptions, misunderstanding, to see how to improve, again, critical thinking. How can we actually ethically consider that these technologies can actually provide me the help, like the armor is just the extension of my arm, but how these tools can actually be used properly in an ethical way. And that's why responsible generative AI, responsible AI, is a very important aspect.
Right. So do we think that we're approaching artificial general intelligence?
Can you say it again?
Do you think that we're approaching artificial general intelligence with the current generative AI technologies?
Please, there was a big step ahead since the rise of ChatGPT for everyone, not only the scientists or the engineers or people really involved for many years, as you said, in AI. But for sure, there's a big step.
Yeah.
But still, we are very far from the general intelligence. Then we will see what will happen. I frequently say to my clients or to our colleagues, to our consultants, I don't have a crystal ball anymore.
Yeah.
I tend to be fairly skeptical about it, very critical of the baseline technologies of neural nets, and to me that's a simplified engineering explanation of how the brain works and correlates data. And the reality is we're decades and decades away from understanding how the brain really works, and that's when we'll start to replicate those systems. But even at that point, we're not giving ourselves enough credit. As humans, we're adaptable. So even if you figure out how the brain works, we're going to evolve from that.
Maybe to add on this, we don't actually have a definition for human intelligence, right? Or our cognitive abilities. So we're still working around with concepts, right, for ourselves, where research is, going far, far, far more back than on the technology side. What we all see is that this is rapidly developing, but where I'm very careful is, AI is a tool, and there needs to be some responsibilities because we all use those tools. We benefit from them, right? But still, we need to assume responsibilities for those tools. And as we were talking about misconceptions, so I'm from the legal side, and what I often see or hear, or what has happened, a lawyer has asked ChatGPT to write a court brief and submitted it with false and hallucinated references. So we also need to think about the use case, because a language model is a language model. Of course, it can help you in creating text and spinning ideas off, but it's not a research tool. So we also kind of need to be really specific about which problem do we want to solve with which technology, because generative AI is not the solution for everything, right? There might be other concepts that fit the use case far more better. So here I think we need to be very careful in trying to have a hammer of generative AI and see all nails. So that's something I wanted to share and add.
Yeah.
I think you used a very important word, is model. Large language models. This word is crucial. It's not perfect. OpenAI aims to, try to understand what they want to achieve, but their goal is actually to see how they can replicate the human brain functioning using technology, using software, etc. But that's a model. And AI, generative AI obviously even also, is all about uncertainty. And so we need to really understand this. It's a model. It becomes better and better, but that's something that we need to keep in mind every time for using that model for something.
Yeah. So, Bernhard, so to get you involved in this discussion, as a fellow educator, how do you see your area of education or others outside of the tech industry, such as healthcare and enterprise, ensure that their workplace, or in this case, the educational environment, their clients or students, feel comfortable and safe with the use of AI technology in these fields?
Thank you, Larry. Yes, I believe, and I think this was well expressed, for most people in the general public, this is really a Gutenberg moment. And even though not even all experts or experts understand where this journey will lead us, people, I believe, instinctively feel that probably no stone in the world will be left unturned. And we see this particularly in schools. You mentioned the models that are most widespread used. ChatGPT is a good example. And truly, this has probably caused an existential crisis for traditional education. It used to be an expert in front, and then students would study and learn and reproduce certain knowledge in forms of essays. And we've all seen over the last few months that this is clearly a system that is not sustainable. So the approach that we have taken is, already before the general availability of these AI models, is to look at what type of skills should human beings learn if we want to prepare them for the 21st century. And so we had great debates inviting students to introduce AI models to us. They run exam questions in language models, and sometimes the AI did an outstanding job, and sometimes it didn't. Why? And that's what you mentioned earlier, because it was not built to answer those questions. Some of the results were biased or discriminatory. That makes for an excellent debate, and I think debate and learning is always a key to address potential misconceptions, but also to ensure that the general public has an understanding of what the upsides are, which we believe outweigh the risks, but what are potential risks of wide-scale AI usage.
So does anybody else want to take that question from the perspective of just outside the tech industry in enterprise or healthcare, outside of where people traditionally think of AI being deployed, but now with technology as it's coming out so publicly, it seems, well, as you can see, many, many different industries are interested, in fact, more than interested, committed to deploying this technology. So how do we ensure the workforce and the clients feel comfortable with this technology?
I can comment from the industry side a little bit, but it ties very much in what you said, right? Also, in the company side, it's important to think about these new technologies from a strategic point of view. So kind of like not just everyone is doing something with AI, we also need a POC. Thinking about what strategic goal are you trying to achieve with AI, and then onboarding your employees, right? Because we're all in this journey, and what we see happening is, at least there are statistics from Austria, and I think it might be very similar in other countries. 25% of employees are secretly using ChatGPT and other tools, to do their work, because there is no guidance. This is actually very, very bad. We've seen business secrets float out into the market, causing huge economical damage to companies, just because there was no guidance. Are we allowing this? Aren't we? How shall we deal with this? So board on your employees, give them guidance of how to use and not use these technologies, for example. I think this is a very important point, in particular now, where we're in some sort of, let's say, legal limbo, right? We have some regulations, we do not have the AI Act, so guidance is really key. And again, the awareness topic.
I think there's an opportunity here somewhere, and I don't know where it exists, but for a learning distinction between, machine learning or data science that's used in product versus likeness use or generative, which is very discrete, specific. So maybe companies having transparency in how the data is used, but also I think there's an opportunity for legalese to be cleansed, right? I mean, we all go to a website and there's, you have to scroll down this whole thing and nobody ever reads it. If that was clear and concise and just had a few bullet points and said, hey, look, this is how we're using your data, and you can opt out, that kind of disclaimer, I think we need a whole new revolution on that front.
There's in organizations and private organizations, especially when I mainly focus on financial services, which is very regulated in terms of financial risks. Now the question is about harming the user, harming the human, being an employee or being the customer of the bank or the insurance, for instance. We see three value propositions in this. The why particular, we know that there's value creation, and we said already this morning that it should be value-driven artificial intelligence. So these values are fundamental, the human values. So creating value, we know the economic side of it, the economic impact of generative AI, the human impact. It's about augmenting human potential rather than automating, replacing job and all these kind of things. Secondly, when we talk about augmenting human potential, it's about education from our children, their teachers, maybe first, and then at university, and then our professionals. How do we teach? It's not just using the tool, clicking here, writing down there, etc. It's really what is the ethical way I should use the tool? How, again, critical thinking about it. Am I aware that me, human in the loop of this AI, actually I have confidence in the answer? And then thirdly, the third value proposition is building this confidence. How can I infuse these tools in a positive way in organizations and with the right scale, the right step-by-step approach? ChatGPT, yes, you use, as you say, Jeanette, you use ChatGPT maybe in your corner, you haven't paid a license, it's not secured, okay? How can you actually use it properly in a secured way? Security matters a lot, especially because externally to the organization, there's also a lot of cyber criminals that can poison the data of a large language model, for instance. So first thing, then educating and being capable to adopt, which is a momentum. Okay, now I accept that these generative AI solutions can benefit for my work and benefit for my organization, benefit for the society. And then, how do you ensure that you use it? Because you might get delayed because your colleague, maybe more junior, maybe more hands-on with the technology, will really be very productive, much more productive. So how do you make sure that you use, depending on what is your job and what you want to do?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry if I may add to this, because I think you're making a very, very important point. In our digitalization journey, even pre-AI, we noticed that it's important outside the tech space to pick up your team and to make sure to explain to them the potential application of technology in general, and particularly with AI, because you will meet the room, you address a team, no questions, hardly any, and you will realize 15-20% of your workforce are very much interested. They have an understanding of the technology. There'll probably be another 80% who do not dare to speak out, and they will just nod, and they will go home, and they might be afraid or frustrated or both.
Yeah, we're discussing, I think, a balance that exists between the benefits and the risks. But to put a finer point on it, do you think, anybody on the panel, do you think that we should be increasing the regulation on AI? Should we be slowing down progress on AI to make sure that we have this balance between its use and, and the benefits to responsible use? Do you think we should slow down the technology or regulate it?
Personally, I don't think we should slow it down, because the whole world is moving in that direction, whether it's regulated or not. There's two things that will self-regulate. One is major corporations are fairly conservative with liability, and so they do have ethic committees, and they do pay attention to how the tools are procured and integrated into pipeline and product. And number two is consumer sentiment regulates. So we've seen a lot of that historically with like GDPR and other data protections that, the social media data mining, there was a backlash, products get regulated. So there's some natural things that happen in certain industries. I do think that agencies should be aware. I don't know that there's going to be a global standard, but I think some of it's organic.
Well, should we slow down technology? I think the genie is out of the box. Even if we want to, we wouldn't be able to. So I think it's all about developing the right approach. Good example of AI legislation is our student had an initiative where they came together and wrote a AI charter, 13 points that could form the seed of a global legislation for AI. Why they understand, in addition to the fact that we can't slow down technological advance, there are also no borders for technology. So we are witnessing a lot of individual, local, regional, national legislation, but Rosenberg students understand that this cannot be an ultimate solution. So I think it's this type of debate that needs to happen, and needs to happen fast. So I was very pleased to see the speaker representing the United Nations earlier today. I'm just a little bit worried that maybe overall there's a lack of the sense of urgency.
I agree with my fellow speakers that actually, as you said it perfectly, you cannot put the genie back into the bottle. It's out there, right? And also, I think it's not moratoriums for technology we need, it's measures. And actually, I wore this blazer on purpose because I think it represents very well what is happening regulatorily, right? And there is a lot of enthusiasm and opportunities out there, and we're all experimenting, of course. But legally and regulatory-wise, we're missing some blank spots. And these blank spots we need to fill appropriately for the entrepreneurs, actually, to take up the chances in the market. Because if we look at the EU, we have 27 member states with 27 different jurisdictions, right? So every time you cross the border, you need to start from zero. This is something we need to fix to make it possible for companies to scale quickly in Europe their AI solutions they're building here. So I think here regulation will actually solve a huge problem. We need to clarify liability. Everyone that looked into software liability knows it's a little bit of a minefield, right? I mean, do I need to do the update or not update? Who's liable for the update? Who's liable for the software? Is software a product? I mean, this is a huge complex, and also liability issues are holding entrepreneurs back. And to make a last point on where we kind of like have a huge blank spot, in particular with relation to generative AI, that I think we need to fill and fix, is the topic I think you touched upon. It's nice, we're all being enabled to be creators. Everyone can create text, audio, video very, very easily now. This is democratization of creativity, which is really, really nice. But since everyone can do this on an automated, large, massive scale, this is also a threat to free media, to the plurality of media, to our democracies. We have the topic, what was mentioned earlier, of misinformation, disinformation, and all those things that I think touch upon the core values, and we need to get this right and fill a very, very big blank spot here. In a nutshell, yes, I think we need some regulation to keep us all on a good path to harness the power of these technologies for our economies, but also for our societies. And also for the environment, we must not forget, training these large models costs a lot of resources. There was actually a report that said drinking water supplies, so we need 1/3 plus more drinking water to cool all those servers that are doing all those computations for us. So this is something to think about in addition to the electricity, the CO2, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot to think about, so that's why I say, yes, we need some regulation to fill the blank spots that will then enable us better to really take advantage of the potential we have with this technology.
Any other comments?
A lot has been said already. I think, yeah, there's the governments with the law, taking back the metaphor of the hammer. You have a law not to knock people, but still you can go on the road and drive very fast and you get a fine, but still you can harm people. You need to go down to the accountability of the people in the teams, again, whoever is using. And of course, it's about innovation. So that's this balance. Innovation, organization wanted to transform themselves. We went through multiple crises. We are going through wars and many bad situations in the society. So organization, private organization especially, not necessarily the tech ones, of course, they very clear for them to innovate. But how can you innovate but doing the right things together? How can you actually make sure that people are accountable for what they develop with these technologies, because there are different layers. Of course, it's accessible to have ChatGPT, I subscribe and then I get access, but that's much more complicated than that if you want to put that at scale. I mean, not that complicated, it becomes simpler and simpler, but still you need engineers, lawyers, business specialists, architects, multidisciplinary teams to understand all different aspects to assemble the right solution and make these people accountable, their managers, the organization, the firm, once you publish that to the external.
Yeah.
I fully agree. Just one point, and this is, I really liked what you said, kind of like of allocating responsibility, because I think this is what the regulation is trying to do. I find myself often talking about also the AI did that, the chatbot did that, right? But at the end, it's us humans using those tools, so the user and the deployer. So the regulation is like looking into the mirror and allocating responsibility for the things we are releasing to the market, controlled or maybe uncontrolled, and the things we are using those tools for.
I would just like to add to this as well. I think the idea of the multidisciplinary approach is absolutely correct. It is critical that we do not leave legislation up to a certain group of either technology experts or legal experts, because, as a great example, if you ask a group of even primary school students, do you think AI should be allowed to decide under certain circumstances on its own to take decisions, for example, to kill somebody if that person poses a threat to somebody else? So the big questions of artificial intelligence actually are also humanist questions. They're questions for historians, they're questions for legislators, and I think it's important not only in terms of age group, getting children, young adults on board of this discussion, but also getting experts from all walks of life as part of this drive to find a good balance, and I think that was said, and that is the key between progress and potential downside risk.
I think you're right. The future generation is where the onus actually lies in this, and I have young kids, and I've actually allowed them to play with these tools because I want them to understand the capabilities and open their minds, right? So early adoption of these things just allows them to see the utility and the use for good. I also think there's an opportunity for curriculum change and critical thinking. It's a lost art. If we can do that based on technology and some future projection, then people will enter the workforce with a little bit more tool sets for understanding this kind of stuff.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, so this has been fascinating. So we're going to open it up now for questions from you all. And I think that we have people with microphones. Okay, yes, here's a question right here.
Okay, so I work with a lot of companies and I speak at these companies, especially for employees and learning and development companies, L&Ds that are in there. These are, what I tend to find is that they are unaware of other LLMs. They believe ChatGPT is the only thing in town, even though there might be like Claude 2, which Amazon dropped $4 billion into Anthropic. And the second thing, so there's a misperception I find that they just assume if they put in all their private data, that it's going to be 100% correct. And this is with committees that have legal on there, that has finance, that L&D is there. So there's this, my question is, when we're talking enterprise with employees that are using, because they're using ChatGPT, it's free, they don't realize about the other LLMs that are out there. They're cutting and pasting and just, sticking this in there, and then you have L&D departments who do not have the financial wherewithal necessarily, and they have no idea about hallucinations and some of these other things. How do you get it so that there is this universal understanding with these companies that, it's not necessarily ChatGPT and that's the only way to go, and then understanding that there is this infallibility. So yes, you can cut and paste, and I meet executives that do that every day. They just cut and paste and they think, this is all true, and they ignore everything else. How do you get them to understand that this isn't
That's a technology
infallible?
Leadership issue, right?
Right, that's right.
So you need educated leaders, and you need engineers that do internal testing on the various tools. And that just creates job opportunities internally at companies. The other thing is to be aware that your data is being reused for reinforcement, right? And so there are certain things like we won't put code in, or we won't put art language or legal language in because that becomes part of the domain.
Yeah, that's a good question. And just to add a little bit to what Mike just said, from a perspective of this technology versus prior technology, in addition to the necessary legislation or regulations, even within companies, I think you're pointing out that there's a lack of understanding of the technology itself. And we need to have people inside these companies that are technologists. We talk about slowing down investment in the technology. We could be thinking about increasing the funding for scientists that are actually testing and regulating, making sure, but these are scientists, because it's a technological question. That's a good question. Other questions? Yes.
Hello. Hello. Yeah, Armin Furtwängler. I work for Boehringer Ingelheim, which is a pharmaceutical company. I'm just a plain old physician, but I consider myself being a geek because my dad worked for IBM. My son has a master and is working on his PhD in computational science and works for the equivalent of the FBI in Germany, so for the Bundeskriminalamt as a cyber cop. I heard a lot of good things also from the United Nations, from you, from the panel conversation here, and from the global approaches. What is your view and the panel's view on the imminent really separation where we have a fragmentation of the web, where the Chinese will not play along, where India will not play along, where Russia will not play along? We had 3 decades when we were all dreaming of a utopia of shared resources and universal democratization of data and stuff like that. And now you see in really the trade wars that we have between the United States and China extrapolated into the web, into the virtual reality and all that stuff. So what's your view and the dream of Tim Berners-Lee and 3 decades of positive development of the internet? What's your view on that?
I'd love to answer this question, and I think it is a very good one, by the way. It's something that our students have been engaging with as well when they were thinking about the AI Charter and trying to find a common approach. I believe AI regulation, just like the big question of global warming, are questions that can only be approached if nations collaborate. I don't see it as bleak as you. As an educator, of course, I'm an idealist at heart. I believe there are also examples where, for example, even at the height of the Cold War, there was an understanding between the East and the West, for example, as to the use of nuclear weapons. I believe the world very quickly after, if you all remember, the sheep dolly that was cloned, the world community very quickly came together and the majority of countries agreed on establishing certain principles that should govern this new technology. But it's true, it is the only way to approach this topic is in a global way.
So it looks like our time is up. Thank you very much for the panelists. They will all be here, so you can ask some questions afterwards. Thank you.